Hello, vinyl community. Imagine you were a teenager in the Midwest in 1967 or 68. You would turn on your radio, and this is probably what you listened to.
And the hits just keep on coming.
CKLW, the Motor City.
Ladies and gentlemen, the beat goes on.
CKLW, the Motor City.
CKLW, the Big Eight. I thought I would make this video of some of my favorite music stations I used to listen to. They don't exist in their original format anymore. I grew up in the early 60s, so probably the earliest radio station that we listened to, I lived about 40 miles southeast of Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we would listen to WOWO 1190 on your AM dial. It was a 50,000 watt radio station, which is extremely powerful. There weren't that many 50,000 watters in the United States. You could listen to, I had an uncle who was in the Navy during the 50s, Uncle Tommy. He was down by the equator, and he could pick up WOWO crystal clear at nighttime down by the equator. So extremely powerful signal. Lots of the eastern United States could pick it up very clearly. They would play the popular hits. You know, the Beatles, Stones, Lovin' Spoonful, top 40, top 30, top 40 songs. Now, when I got a little bit older, probably around 1967 or 68, there was a station. Actually, it was in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. It was called CKLW, the Big Eight, and that's the intro. I think you called it Big Boss format back then. It was top 40, top 50. The DJs were rather fast talking. Really, things moved along really quick. Like I said, the CKLW, or CK as we referred to it as, was actually in Windsor, Ontario, just across the river from Detroit. Now, their broadcast signal during the daytime, I don't know how many watts they pushed, but you could, like we lived probably 2.5 hours from Detroit, and clear as a bell. Now, around 7 o'clock in the evening, they would cut the power. So it was rather unlistenable after that. But when that arrived on the scene, you know, if you were cool, you know, a cool junior high student or high school, that's the station you would listen to. They were, and the CKLW, if you're not familiar, you know, Canadian radio stations basically start with C. Mexican radio stations start with X for their call letters. The East Coast, east of the Mississippi, most of the stations start with W. If you go west of the Mississippi, most of the stations start with K. So, CKLW. Anyhow, they were known for their, at this time, and I don't know if it's still like that today, you had to have so many minutes of news on the radio stations, probably 5 or 10, maybe, whatever, per hour. So CKLW did something a little different. They had what they called 2020 news. So instead of having the news at the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour, they would have it at 20 after and 20 till. They did this to get the radio audience from other stations at the top of the hour when they would have news. If people wanted to listen to music, they would switch to CKLW. And CKLW News, which I will play a short clip, was, I guess you would call it sensational, to say the least. Just bear with me a little bit. This is a...
CKLW giving you a chance to win the new For You album combo in just a few minutes. It's 2:20, and with 2020 news, Grant Hudson.
The remaining 7 bodies have been recovered from the crew abandonment of a Dutch freighter that ran into trouble in rough seas in the Atlantic. The diabetic who knows the most makes the best progress. For information and free literature, contact the Canadian Diabetic Association. Motor City weather, overcast with drizzle today, high 52. Partly cloudy and cool tonight.
You'll hear the gruesome details.
30, high Monday,
how
46.
they reported the news.
Cleveland 52 degrees, Toledo 49, Detroit 49, 9 Celsius. Grant Hudson 2020 News. Now more music with Charlie O'Brien at CKLW.
20 minutes before 5. This is Lee Marshall, CKLW 2020 News. An unidentified young boy was riding his bike on Van Dyke near Lance this afternoon when a steel truck collided with that boy, knocking him about 20 feet. Eyewitness James Mays was there. He called the law, then called the Big 8 to say it was enough to make you sick.
Well, they just moved the steel truck off of part of the body, and they were using shovels to put part of the smashed parts in plastic bags. And they put what was left of him on a stretcher and hauled it in back to one of the emergency units. And they just pulled the steel truck up so they could get the rest of it. And he squashed beyond recognition. You can't tell it's a little boy even, hardly. And they just put him in the truck and get ready to take him away.
Meanwhile, a body was discovered in a car on I-75 near the London overpass in Lincoln Park. The car was registered to...
I think you get the picture. Their news, and some of their newscasters, I don't know if they electronically lowered their voice. I think they did on some of them. They're like, 45 people were killed in Detroit last night. No suspects have been brought in. Anyhow, so CKLW, they were basically Detroit. They played a lot of Motown, of course, along with other popular music. Why not? And somebody once said at the time, CKLW was probably the blackest white radio station in North America, which, yeah, they were. They played a ton of Motown. So it was very enjoyable listening to that. When I got older and went to college, went up to Bowling Green, stations then, I remember WIOT from Toledo. They were FM rock station. Now, back in the day, early 70s, they had a syndicated radio program called King Biscuit Flower Hour. A lot of times they would have live concerts from around the nation. They would broadcast them live. And stations such as WIOT would play those live. So we listened to a lot of, and they would have maybe National Lampoon. They might have had that radio hour on there. I'm not sure about that. But so anyhow, after that, I moved up to Cleveland for a while. And I always knew some Clevelanders and they always went on and on about this radio station, WMMS, home of the buzzard, up in Cleveland. And I was exposed to that, and wow, yeah, is probably the best rock station I've ever heard in my life. It was at FM. So anyhow, I moved up there, and their DJs, I remember Jeff and Flash in the morning. They had a couple-hour show, or they had the morning show. Kid Leo, which nowadays he broadcasts on, I don't know if it's classic tracks or deep tracks on Sirius Radio. He has a show on there, Kid Leo. They would, a lot of times, WMMS, they would broadcast, they had, I think they called it Friday morning concert series. So it might start at, I'm not sure, 10:30 or 11 o'clock. They would have maybe a band playing at the Agora Ballroom, which was Cleveland's version of the Fillmore, East or West. Smaller, I'm sure, but it served the same purpose. So they would broadcast live, like Bruce Springsteen would be in town. They would broadcast that concert from the Agora live. I'm sure they did Todd Rundgren from there. I'm not sure if Bowie was ever did anything, but Cleveland helped break a large amount of rock groups back in the day, and WMS was a large part of that. And actually, in the Rolling Stones Readers Poll, which they conducted, I don't know if they still do, it'd be like your favorite radio station. Well, WMMS won that like 10 years in a row, nationwide, best radio station in the country. Which I have read since then that there might have been some ballot stuffing going on. But nonetheless, it was truly a fantastic radio station. So, a couple others briefly. I moved back to my hometown. In the late 70s, there was a small radio station, WKKI, that they changed formats, and they would play a lot of new wave music, more the punk stuff, and local bands. They would play records by them. So they were popular in the early 80s. Now, nowadays, I don't listen a lot to terrestrial radio. I listen a lot to Sirius satellite radio. I love that. And then in the past few years, in the very small town, village that I live in, they formed it's called a low power FM radio station. Public. So as far as advertising, you can't really advertise, but businesses can underwrite programs. So, very low power. I don't know how many watts it is. Probably, I don't know, 10 or 20. But those small amount of watts, it has a radius of probably, it's about probably 10 to 12 miles radius around the area. And they cover local high school sports. A lot of the music is kind of like automated, but they play really good music. And they have younger kids, maybe high school students or slightly older, have their own programs. And the station is called WRKD, I think it's 101.3. They do. They are on the internet, so anybody can listen to it, stream it. So, and one of these days, maybe I'll do a little programming for them. I've talked to them about that. They have some issues right now. They're trying to straighten out, but it's fully operating, fully functioning. Sounds good. So maybe I'll get a little more involved with that. So that's kind of like a brief history of my radio listening experiences from my youth. Like I said, I thought I would put them on video because as I get older, I tend to forget things. So I have a record. So anyhow, this is Bradley. I want to thank for everybody subscribing to my channel and commenting. I like it. So that's it for today. Have a good one. See ya.